The observation chamber aboard the orbital station Ilix 4 buzzed softly with the hum of recalibrating sensors and the occasional hiss of gaseous coolant. The lead xenologist, a thin, six-limbed creature named Dralix, adjusted the imaging filters with a twitch of its upper digits. It had been orbiting Earth for nearly 6 planetary rotations and still could not comprehend the sheer absurdity of the latest footage captured in a downtown parking lot in Albuquerque. A man named Varek Pulston stood in front of a cheering crowd, holding what was identified as a Carolina Reaper pepper between his thumb and index finger. Its heat rating exceeded 2 million Scoville units. Dralix had already read the chemical breakdown. Capsaicin was a known irritant and evolutionary deterrent. Yet the human was willingly placing it in his mouth. "Begin playback," Dralix instructed. The image zoomed in. Varek bit into the pepper and chewed. His eyes bulged. A moment later, he dropped to his knees, coughing violently, face turning crimson. A second human handed him milk while others clapped and laughed. Some recorded it on their devices. "This is not sustenance," Dralix muttered. "It is self-torture." The automated assistant, a drone named Vron, whirred overhead. "This is the 4th instance of observed pepper challenges within 2 standard days. Shall I classify it under ritualistic behavior or masochism?" Dralix hesitated. "Neither. We must investigate further. Prepare the insertion pod. I want to observe this Varek Pulston directly." Varek leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping cold water through a straw. His cheeks were still blotchy from the heat, and his tongue felt as though it had been sandpapered. The competition had been a mistake. "Idiot," muttered Leora Zen from the living room. She was sprawled across the couch, scrolling through videos on her tablet. "You knew it was going to burn. But no. Let's impress a crowd of strangers by setting our insides on fire." He groaned. "I didn't think it'd be that bad. You said that last time. And the time before. This was different. How? I don't know. Felt like I had something to prove." She rolled her eyes. "To who?" "Your esophagus." Before Varek could answer, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then surged back to full brightness. He straightened, alert. Leora sat up. "Was that the grid again?" "No," Varek said slowly. "That wasn't the grid." Outside, the air shimmered above the backyard. A circular indentation pressed into the soil, grass folding sideways like a crop circle. A soft hum grew into a dull whine. Then, with a hiss, a small silver pod emerged from the shadows of the oak tree. Leora stepped back. "What the hell is that?" The pod opened. Dralix stepped out, scanning its environment. Its upper limbs twitched as it adjusted a sensor strapped across its torso. Varek stared. "Is that an alien?" "I am Dralix," it said, its vocal modulator translating in real time. "I have come to understand your species' curious obsession with peppers." "You are Varek Pulston, correct?" Varek gawked at it. "You came here. About the pepper thing?" "Yes," Dralix said. "You ingested a substance with known neurogenic inflammation properties. You did this voluntarily. We have recorded 423 similar incidents globally." "Wait," Varek said, blinking. "You're telling me you're from space, and your biggest concern is people eating spicy food?" "It defies reason," Dralix replied. "We assumed it was a form of punishment." But the subjects appeared to laugh, cheer, and even repeat the experience. Leora stepped forward, arms crossed. "Well, that's humanity for you. We do dumb things for fun." Dralix tilted its head. "You are not obligated to suffer. You experience pain and yet celebrate." Varek shrugged. "It's a challenge, a test of endurance." "Self-inflicted pain as performance," Dralix said. "Fascinating." Without warning, Dralix extended a small device toward Varek. A blue light scanned his torso. "Hey, you can't just scan me. I must understand the physiological response. You consumed a substance designed to mimic neural fire. That is madness." "It's just capsaicin," Varek said. "It's not lethal." "Not lethal," Dralix repeated. But it causes sweating, nausea, hallucinations, and in some cases, esophageal tears. Leora pointed at Varek. He got all of that last week. You tore your esophagus? Dralix asked. Just a little, Varek muttered. It healed. Dr. Yalv, another xenologist, arrived from the pod holding a small containment unit. We have retrieved several pepper specimens. May we observe another live ingestion? No, shouted Leora. Yes, said Varek at the same time. Leora threw her hands up. Are you serious? Dralix handed Varek a pepper from the containment unit. It was dark red and wrinkled like a dried cherry. Please ingest. Varek took a deep breath. Then he bit into it. The result was immediate. Tears streamed down his face. His breathing turned shallow. He stumbled toward the sink and vomited. Leora grabbed a towel and held it to his forehead as he slumped to the floor, shivering. This is not recreational, Dralix said, watching him convulse. This is a crisis. 2 hours later, Varek was lying on the couch with an ice pack on his stomach and a trash bin beside his head. Leora paced in front of the aliens. He's got gastritis now. No way he's eating solid food for 2 days. We must understand the compulsion, Dralix said. Why do you engage in behavior that causes injury? Pride, Leora said. Ego, adrenaline. There are contests, records, videos. People like to prove they can take more than others. Is this common? More than you'd think. Dr. Yulv played a video on its device. A man in India drank ghost pepper sauce while running on a treadmill. Another in Sweden inserted peppers into his nostrils while laughing. This is cultural? Dralix asked. No, Leora replied. It's just humans. We're weird. In the days that followed, Dralix and Dr. Yulv followed Varek across the country. They filmed him attending pepper festivals, interviewing pepper breeders, and speaking to medical professionals. They recorded a man whose stomach lining had to be surgically repaired after a pepper eating contest. Another suffered a collapsed lung from vomiting too hard. Varek himself ended up in the ER after a habanero milkshake challenge. His blood pressure spiked and he passed out in the parking lot. A CT scan revealed inflammation but no long-term damage. Still, he spent 3 days recovering. Leora was livid. You're becoming their lab rat. I want to help, Varek said weakly. Let them understand us. By destroying your insides? Dr. Yulv hovered near Varek's hospital bed. We have documented over 30 separate incidents where humans willingly consumed capsaicin-rich foods to impress others. This is more than curiosity. It is ritualistic endurance. No, Varek whispered. It's stupid. But we do it anyway. Dr. Yulv turned to Dralix. Perhaps stupidity is a survival trait. That would explain much, Dralix said. Back at Ilix 4, the footage was broadcast to the Interstellar Behavioral Symposium. Dozens of species observed the playback in stunned silence. Footage of Varek collapsing with foam on his lips after a Naga Viper sauce challenge played on loop. A Jelvian scholar raised a tentacle. Do they derive pleasure from this? No, Dralix said. They suffer. And then they laugh. Why? We do not know. A vote was held. The behavior was officially classified as voluntary pain ritual type 7. The humans had created a new category. Back on Earth, Varek was recovering with a bland diet and doctor's orders to avoid all peppers. Leora handed him a bowl of plain rice. No spices. Not even black pepper. He sighed. I miss flavor. You miss stomach bleeding? No. Good. Outside their house, the grass glowed faintly from the residues of the landing pod. Ilix 4 had left, but not without leaving behind a note. Your pain habits are confusing. We will observe from a safe distance. Varek chewed his rice slowly. I'm retiring from competitive pepper eating, he said. Finally, Leora muttered. Then he added, but I might grow some jalapenos in the garden. She didn't answer. Just gave him a look that promised pain. Not the pepper kind. And that, Varek knew, was the smarter pain to avoid. Varek's left eye twitched involuntarily as the cold probe slid behind his earlobe. The technician, a square-shouldered woman with a clipboard and a dispassionate stare, didn't acknowledge his discomfort. You'll feel a bit of pressure. Try not to swallow. He opened his mouth to reply, but the metal tip scraped the back of his throat and triggered a gag reflex. He flinched, eyes watering. I said not to swallow. I didn't, he croaked. Across the room, a man in a navy blue lab coat tapped on a tablet. We're logging cranial nerve responses to capsaicin-induced trauma. He's showing residual inflammation in the glossopharyngeal tract. That's consistent with hyperstimulation. Is that bad? Varek asked, voice hoarse. Mildly alarming. We're still interpreting the long-term implications. But you're technically functional. Fantastic. The technician withdrew the probe and handed him a paper cup of water. We need to take a mucosal swab next. Varek groaned. Can't I just donate blood like a normal test subject? We already drained 2 vials this morning. That had been at sunrise. It was now late afternoon, and the fluorescent lights in the clinical lab had taken on an interrogatory hue. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something metallic, like rusted hinges. Through the observation pane, Dralix watched with an intensity that made the back of Varek's neck itch. The alien had not blinked, assuming it even had eyelids since the procedure began. Leora lounged near the corner, arms crossed, staring at the ceiling tiles. She hadn't spoken much since they entered the research facility. The only thing she'd said was, don't sign anything without reading it twice. Varek had ignored that advice. There had been a clipboard. He'd been groggy. He might have signed over rights to his digestive tract. Dr. Ilsa Hammond, head of the Xenomedical Exchange Program, entered briskly. Her white coat flared as she moved. Status? The technician handed over the swab and rattled off a string of numbers. Hammond turned to Varek. You're developing an ulcer. We're putting you on a proton pump inhibitor and a restricted diet. No solids for 3 days. Again? You're lucky it's not a feeding tube. Dralix tapped on the glass. Hammond sighed. Yes, you can come in. The alien stepped into the lab, trailing a faint scent of static electricity and ozone. Its translator clicked once before engaging. We have analyzed the neural signal patterns from his previous ingestion. His suffering appears to activate reward centers in the brain. How is this possible? Dopaminergic response, Hammond said. Humans associate accomplishment with discomfort under certain conditions. It's poorly understood. Dralix stared at Varek. You felt triumph while your tissues deteriorated? Kind of, Varek muttered. It felt like beating a video game on the hardest setting. But with more vomiting. Hammond pinched the bridge of her nose. He's not a representative sample. He's a cautionary tale. Dralix's upper limbs folded in a gesture Varek had come to interpret as contemplation. We require further testing. No, Hammond said flatly. He's medically compromised. You collected enough data. Leora stepped forward. You've got hours of footage already. You've seen him cry, bleed, and dry heave into a planter. What more could you possibly need? Emotional context, Dralix replied. We require insight into the communal aspect of the suffering. Hammond raised an eyebrow. You want to observe him among others? Precisely. The social dimension appears integral. I'm not doing another festival, Varek blurted. Last time I blacked out near a churro stand. We are not requesting another ingestion, Dralix said. Merely observational data. Leora narrowed her eyes. Define observational. No food, no pain. Just interaction. A silence fell. Then Hammond exhaled sharply. Fine, but he wears a monitor. And if his heart rate spikes above 120, you pull him out. Agreed, Dralix said. 2 days later, just after dusk, they arrived at a converted warehouse on the edge of town. Inside, the monthly meeting of the Capsaicin Brotherhood was in full swing. Dozens of people milled around tables stacked with hot sauce bottles, dried chilies in vacuum-sealed bags, and hand-labeled tinctures that looked more like chemical weapons than condiments. Someone was wearing a cape made from crushed pepper sachets. Another had a tattoo of a chili pepper holding a flamethrower. Varek adjusted the wireless monitor strap to his chest. Why does this feel like a cult? Leora scanned the crowd. Because everyone here looks like they've made at least one regrettable decision. Dralix stood near the entrance, attempting to blend in by wearing a hoodie and sunglasses. It failed. A man with a deep tan and arms like tree trunks approached Varek. You Pulston? Varek nodded warily. I saw your ghost sauce clip. You almost bit your own tongue off. I'm trying to move past that. The man grinned. Name's Curtis. I make my own blend Scorpion's Mercy. You ever want to test it, hit me up. No offense, but I'm not accepting anything called Mercy from a guy who looks like he bench presses barbecue grills. Curtis laughed and clapped him on the back, nearly dislocating a shoulder. Fair. Dralix recorded every interaction, occasionally muttering into a small recorder. A woman in a lab apron dashed past them, carrying a tray of small paper cups. Samples. First batch of Reaper extract 6. Waivers required. Varek backed away. I'm good. He and Leora found a quiet corner near the makeshift stage, where someone was giving a speech about responsible capsaicin cultivation. I thought this was going to be more like a tasting. This is aggressive, Varek said. Everyone here is a half step from setting their own tongues on fire for likes, Leora replied. You fit right in. Not anymore. I'm reformed. You say that now. Dralix approached. We observed spontaneous social bonding. The shared history of suffering appears to foster camaraderie. That's human nature, Leora said. We trauma bond. Fascinating. Later that night, as the crowd began to thin, a man stood up on stage with a microphone. He was wiry, with sunken cheeks and eyes that gleamed with purpose. Brothers and sisters, tonight is special. We've got someone here who's danced with the Reaper and lived. Several heads turned toward Varek. He froze. Come on up, Varek Pulston. Tell us your story. I didn't agree to this, Varek whispered. Go, Leora said. But no speeches about intestinal scarring. He shuffled on stage, blinked into the spotlight, and took the mic. Hi. I guess most of you have seen clips of me doing really dumb things. I've hemorrhaged, I've hallucinated, and I've eaten things that made me question my life choices. Scattered laughter. But I stopped, because I realized something. I wasn't doing it for the flavor. I was doing it to prove I could suffer more than the next guy. And that's not strength. That's insecurity in a Halloween mask. A pause. Someone in the back clapped slowly. But I get it. We're not masochists. We're thrill seekers. We're weird. And maybe that's okay. Just don't forget to check your blood pressure and talk to your doctor. More laughter. A few people cheered. As he stepped down, Dralix met him near the edge of the stage. You have evolved. You now view the behavior with skepticism. I view it with nausea. Still, your insight is valuable. We will include this in our cultural briefings. Happy to help. Just don't ask me to chew anything. Understood. Back at the house, well past midnight, Varek collapsed onto the couch and kicked off his shoes. Leora handed him a mug of lukewarm chamomile tea. Save any lives tonight? She asked. Only my own. She smiled faintly. That's enough. Out in orbit aboard Ilix 4, the footage was already being compiled. A new annotation was added to the Human Behavioral Index, Voluntary Harm for Communal Validation Subtype 3, Heat Endurance as Social Currency. The galaxy didn't understand it, but they couldn't look away. By the time Varek's follow-up endoscopy finished, the nurse had already emptied the third tray of disposable gloves and muttered something about hobbyist masochists and their torched insides. Dr. Levins, a gastroenterologist with a seemingly endless supply of grim frowns, pulled off his latex gloves and tapped the monitor beside the bed. You've got erosion across the pyloric region and patchy inflammation along the duodenal bulb. You're heading for a chronic ulcer if you keep this up. I haven't eaten anything hotter than a bell pepper in weeks, Varek croaked, still dazed from the anesthesia. Doesn't matter. Your stomach's still in recovery. Any more acid stress and you'll be bleeding internally. Again. Leora leaned against the far wall with her arms tucked tightly under her jacket. Can you tattoo that information on his forearm? Maybe in glow-in-the-dark ink. Dr. Levins ignored her and typed something into the chart. No caffeine, no alcohol, no fried foods, no citrus, no chocolate. And absolutely no capsaicin. Not even trace amounts. That's half my diet. Then have your expectations. 2 hours later, after signing a discharge form that included the phrase repeat perforation risk, moderate, Varek was wheeled into the lobby. Leora held the door while he stumbled into the sunlight like a man emerging from a bunker. He squinted. Feels like I've been underground for a week. You've been in outpatient care for 9 hours. Time bends when you've got a scope in your esophagus. She handed him a bottle of antacid tablets and started the car. You know, if you'd just taken up birdwatching like I suggested last year, we wouldn't be here. I tried. I fell asleep watching a sparrow for 40 minutes. They drove in silence for a while, broken only by the soft clatter of tablets in the bottle. Back at the house, Varek shuffled inside, dropped onto the couch, and pulled a blanket over himself like a wounded veteran. Leora placed his prescription bottles on the coffee table. So, now that your gastrointestinal tract has officially filed for a restraining order, what's next? Retirement. From pain. From being a spectacle. The doorbell rang before she could reply. Outside stood Dralix, holding a data slate and wearing what appeared to be a poncho fashioned from repurposed grocery bags. I have completed my ethnographic report, Dralix said, stepping inside. It has been submitted to the Galactic Council for review and cultural indexing. Congratulations, Leora said. Does that mean you're leaving? In a manner of speaking. I have one final request. Varek groaned. I'm not eating anything. You misunderstand. I wish to host a controlled symposium. An exchange of knowledge. No ingestion, no testing. Merely discussion. Leora narrowed her eyes. Where? A neutral site. The Council has approved a temporary learning module at the Terran Interstellar Interface Facility in Nevada. There will be representatives from 7 species. Why do they care about pepper madness? Because it contradicts all known survival logic. It challenges their assumptions about pain, pleasure, and social hierarchy. They are intrigued. Let them be intrigued from orbit, Varek muttered. There will be no media. No recordings. It is not performance. It is explanation. Leora folded her arms. What exactly do you want him to say? Why he did it? Why others do it? Why humans, with all their fragility, continue to test themselves against artificial thresholds? 3 days later, in the middle of a conference room that smelled faintly of ionized air and sterilized plastics, Varek sat at a circular table surrounded by 7 seats and an audience that resembled a paleontology exhibit brought to life. The delegate from 6 or 9 resembled a translucent eel wearing an armored vest. Its eyes operated independently of one another. Next to it, a pair of squat, stone-colored beings from Dralix shifted their weight every few seconds, releasing a puff of vapor as they did so. Across the room, a gelatinous mat of bioluminescent fibers pulsed in shades of pink and green. Dralix presided from the center. This is Varek Pulston. He is not a leader nor a scholar. He is a participant. That is why you are here. The Sixer delegate undulated forward. You inflicted internal damage for social approval? Varek adjusted his seat. I guess? But it wasn't just about people clapping. It was about pushing boundaries. Of safety? Of comfort. There's a weird satisfaction in surviving something intense. We don't always need a reason beyond that. The Dralix delegate released a puff of amber mist. But pain is a deterrent. Why pursue it? Because sometimes we want to test the cage. See how much of it is real and how much we can bend. The gelatinous fiber mat shifted color. Is endurance a currency among your kind? Sometimes. But it's more about proving something to ourselves. That we're more than our limits. Even if the cost is injury? Varek looked around the room. Your species weren't born with fire. You didn't have to learn to cook or survive frostbite or sprint barefoot across volcanic plains. We did. Pain was part of our education. We've just never stopped learning that way. The eel being blinked independently. You romanticize self-damage. We joke about it. That's different. Humor makes it survivable. The room fell quiet. Dralix gestured toward a screen behind them. Images of humans climbing frozen cliffs, dancing barefoot over hot coals, and running marathons while dressed as cartoon animals filled the display. This is not limited to ingestion. You submit yourselves to absurd trials for entertainment. We do, Varek admitted. But not because we enjoy pain. We enjoy the story that comes after. The Dralix beings released a synchronized hiss. You seek narrative over efficiency. Always. The gelatinous mat turned a deep violet, the closest it came to laughter. Then your strength is not just in resistance but reinvention. That's probably the nicest way to say we're ridiculous, Leora said from her seat in the back row. Dralix stepped forward. The symposium is concluded. The delegates have sufficient context. Varek Pulston, your contribution will be archived in the Universal Cultural Compendium. Do I get a certificate? Varek asked. No. But your digestive tract may now rest. As the delegates departed, the mat-like being paused near Varek. You are ill-designed for many environments, yet you persist. You suffer and then you transform that suffering into amusement and myth. That is uniquely inefficient. Thanks. We try. Back on Earth, a week later, Varek stood in his backyard, watching a squirrel try to dismantle the bird feeder. His stomach was still recovering, but he'd regained appetite for bland soup and dry toast. The pepper plants had been uprooted and replaced with basil and mint. Leora brought out 2 mugs of weak herbal tea and handed him one. So, galactic fame achieved. Any regrets? Only that I didn't ask for travel reimbursement. She sat beside him on the porch steps. You think they understood us? Enough to be confused respectfully. The squirrel finally dislodged the feeder, fell onto its head. The squirrel twitched, leapt to its feet, and scurried off triumphantly with a sunflower seed in its mouth. Leora pointed. See that? That's us. Stupid, injured, and still winning. He sipped his tea, wincing slightly at the heat. Sounds about right.